Setting up your Facebook Live.
We're on. Hi, Gary. Thanks
Hey,
for having
Bill.
me on your show.
We're just about ready to get started here. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Judicial Candidate Gary Dolgin interviewing Tampa City Councilman Bill Carlson this afternoon. We've got the picture up there. Welcome, Bill.
Thank you. Appreciate you inviting me today. I'm just sitting here on the beach enjoying the breeze.
Yeah, it looks like a real nice place to be. I think a lot of people out there are happy that they can go back to the beach, and hopefully everyone will stay safe. So, Bill, you are the city councilman for District 4, which is the South Tampa area, and you were elected in 2019. But for those who do not know you, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I grew up in Sebring, which is in the greater Tampa Bay area. Went to the University of Tampa undergrad. The Rotary clubs in the area sponsored me to go overseas, all expenses paid. So I picked Singapore, and I ended up living there for 5 years, studied an MBA program, and then worked all over Asia. And then came back here and been working at and running a PR firm called Tucker Hall for most of the past 25 or so years. Been very involved in the community and helped build up Cafe on Tampa, among other things, and can talk to you about the community stuff. I've been in office in the city of Tampa representing South Tampa for a little over a year.
Well, great. I always like to start off asking everyone that I'm interviewing these days, how are you and your family doing under these unusual, unprecedented circumstances that we all find ourselves in?
Okay, so far, my immediate family, we're just staying here at home, and the kids are doing remote schooling and in between playing video games and other things. So when you hear sound effects, that's the three of them running around my house. We're all working remotely. But on a sadder note, I did have a cousin out of state, in another state, who was 30 and passed away last week. We think from COVID-19. So whatever you've heard, it doesn't matter your age or your health condition. Everybody is susceptible to it. So everybody, please stay safe. And if you don't have to go out and move around, please don't, because it's not worth taking the risk right now.
My condolences to your family. I think everybody is probably, I know that my mother told me of a distant cousin that passed away from coronavirus recently. I did not know that well, but she did, and so it's a really difficult. Just so many people who have lost their lives, been sick, etc. And let's hope that everyone can stay safe. Bill, tell me how your work on the city council and how the city council in general, how things have changed over the past 6 to 8 weeks.
So there's an emergency order process that's been in place for 12 or 15 years, set up by prior city councils, that when we hit an emergency, the mayor takes over the city, and it anticipated all kinds of calamities, including pandemics, but in particular, I think it was written for hurricanes. So people figured it would be, a short time frame. But what that does is, starting on around March 16th, the mayor signed an executive order, following the ordinance the city council put in place years ago. And since then, she's been making most of the decisions of the city. The staff have been great about enabling the city council to come back. In the past few weeks, first we were getting briefings, and now last week we had our first real meeting, although it was virtual. And tomorrow we'll have our first real CRA meeting. Land use and quasi-judicial meetings will start up again in June, meeting in the convention center, because we have to meet in person.
What are your thoughts about the makeup of this committee? You mentioned it had been set up mostly for hurricane planning, but do you think it's a good setup, or do you think it ought to be changed in the future?
Yeah, so the mayor then is part of a county-wide committee called the Emergency Policy Group. And so although the mayor has control of issues within Tampa and can sign contracts within Tampa, she's part of a larger committee county-wide that includes 3 county commissioners, the county administrator, school board chair, sheriff, and the mayors of the two other cities. And collectively, they're the ones that have decided what the policy should be. And then all of their decisions are superseded by the governor or the president if they have other orders. And so it's been an interesting legal challenge. The city council is not involved at all in any of that. The process had anticipated pandemics, but I don't know that anybody had anticipated that the process might be dragged out for this long. And so it probably is worth going back and revisiting how it would work under longer conditions like this. But so far, it's been working out well. In an emergency, especially a catastrophic hurricane, you would want decisions to be made quickly, and they can't be made by committee. They've got to be made by all the people with the right information quickly, and it's understandable that a process like that should be in place.
Got it. For those who don't know, what's the relationship between the city council and the mayor as far as decision making, et cetera?
So just like you remember when you were in when we were all little, they had the Schoolhouse Rock, and they say a bill on Capitol Hill, and we would learn about the different forms of government. We have the executive branch, judicial branch, and legislative branch. Just like at the federal and state government, the mayor is the executive branch. The courts, which you're running for, are separate, and then the city council is the legislative branch. So we create the local laws, and we also approve the budget, and we make decisions on land use issues.
Bill, we've recently had the city, I guess, reopen for. I guess that's the term. What are your thoughts, both personally and as a city council representative, as far as how that's been going and what you would like to see happening?
Yeah, that really came from the state level, and there was a whole set of guidelines for partial reopening. And this has been catastrophic for our economy. I just did an interview on Cafe on Tampa Online with a representative of the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta, and we're looking at 20+% unemployment right now, and maybe 30 or 40% negative impact on our economy, which is really the biggest that anything like that's happened since the Great Depression. Hopefully, a lot of it will bounce back, but certainly not all of it. We've got a trade-off here. Public safety, safety of individuals versus the economy, and the economy falling apart affects lives and could cause deaths as well. One of the things that we've seen, the Tampa Bay Times did a story, I think it was yesterday, where they analyzed cell phone and other data to look at when people started staying at home. And the good news is that they found that people in Florida did their own research and decided to stay home on their own 2 to 3 weeks before the local and state orders went into place. And so the great thing is that encouraging the public, educating the public, it is a great public policy tool without an order to force people to stay home. Now, what I think we need to do is encourage people to continue to stay at home. If you don't need to go out, please stay at home, because it's the safest place. And if you do go out, please, everybody, make sure we're maintaining social distancing and safety guidelines. If you look at the curve, if you look at the bell curve, I'm not going to make a perfect bell curve, but around the middle of March, when we had the safer at home policy start, we were kind of here on the curve, and now we're just off the peak on the other side. And so we're really where we were on the curve 2 or 3 weeks ago, already in quarantine. To get back to where we were March 16th is going to be more like down here around early to mid-June. And so if we want, what that does is it reduces the contact rate. Eventually, maybe all of us will get this, but the idea at first was to flatten the curve to not overwhelm the hospitals. But now the thought is, especially if you're at risk, please stay home, because we need to wait this out until we get some kind of immunity, ideally through a vaccination.
What are your thoughts regarding how Tampa has weathered this economically, and what are your long-term thoughts as far as our local economy?
The economic numbers lag, so we won't know for a couple months how badly it affected it. But we know, looking at the national numbers, and I think some of the statewide numbers, that it's catastrophic for the economy. Now, the good thing is that it doesn't, at least it looks like it's not a systemic issue. It was a temporary, short-term issue. The basic infrastructure is still in place, the basic economy, but some parts of it, like tourism, are going to shift radically, at least for months. Luckily, Tampa is not as dependent on tourism as places like Orlando, but we are very dependent on it. And our airport is very dependent on people coming in and out. And so we'll see. What we've got to do is try to plan our economy for the future, and I can talk about that if you want.
Well, let me ask, if you want to add to that, great. If the other thing that I want to know is, what are you hearing from your constituents out there, and what have you been able? Tell us about what you've been able to share with the mayor as far as your thoughts on the emergency procedures that have been entered, what's going to be happening going forward. We've got restaurants that are open right now where streets are closed, or part of them are closed down, so people can be sitting outside. And a lot of people, are they want to get back out and be having a normal life. But what are tell me what your thoughts and what you're hearing from people.
Unfortunately, perceptions on this fall along partisan lines, because now we all get our information from partisan sources. And I went to graduate school years ago to try to find the answer to policy questions, figuring if it was just a data analysis. And the truth is that any kind of analysis has built-in bias based on the model that you're looking at. And the decisions about whether to open up completely or slowly or to not open at all, unfortunately, are falling along partisan lines. We are getting a lot of complaints about people not adhering to safe distancing, and we'll see what happens if we have a relapse like some other countries have had. It could be really catastrophic for our economy. And so now that we've gone through this process, we need to be really careful so that we don't have to go back in again.
So, Bill, you're a dad. You have 3 sons at home. One of the biggest things I know as a parent, I'm thinking about this as well. Oh, you're no longer at the beach. How about that? You're able to move around. But what are your thoughts about your kids going back to school, just on a personal level? Because I think when you're looking at the economy, especially with younger kids, you have a parent staying at home right now. They can't necessarily go back to their job unless there's something for their kids to do. I know as an elected official, you're probably talking with school board members or other elected officials who are involved in some of this decision making. Give me your thoughts, because I think people want to hear about that. That's one of the top concerns that obviously parents have about the safety of their kids.
Yeah, I think the school decisions have been made through this year anyway. And it's been an interesting experiment. I mean, I think we found that we can adapt quickly and that we can work remotely, but there definitely are benefits of meeting in person for business and school. I was just having discussions this morning about summer camp, and some summer camps are talking about being open, but I'm most likely going to, at least through mid-June, maybe late June, stay home and hopefully let my kids do summer camp remotely, so that we don't get in the mix of everything. In the fall, I don't know. I've got a son who's going to university for the first time in the fall, and we don't yet know whether they'll be open. If there's a relapse and the virus comes back strong, we may all be working remotely for the rest of the year.
Bill, as a city councilman, some people may not know, but you're appointed to various boards, committees. Can you share with everyone what some of those appointments are and what you're doing in your capacity as a member of various boards and committees?
I was already very involved in the community and on lots of boards. I sat on the Florida Chamber Foundation board that helps set the direction of the economy of the state. I sit on the Florida Tax Watch board, which looks at government waste and government spending. I think whether you're on the right or the left, you don't want government to waste money because you can either spend it on more services or you can use it to reduce costs and therefore taxes. I'm involved in several arts organizations, including on the board of the Dali. Through the city, we all city council members sit on the CRA board, which focuses money in certain disadvantaged districts. But I'm also on the public art committee. And the great thing is that now we're seeing a revitalization of the arts community in Tampa. We had a lot of our key artists leave in the last few years because there was not an emphasis on the arts. And now, we've got a mayor who's really interested. We've got a city council who's really interested, and we've always had great staff related to public art.
Bill, one of the jewels of our city is Bayshore Boulevard, and unfortunately, in the last couple of months, we've had two tragedies that have occurred on Bayshore Boulevard. One was a gentleman by the name of George Gage who was walking. He was in my Rotary Club, and he was hit by a drunk driver. And then just back in March, right around the time the coronavirus started, a 50-year-old attorney, Hal Flowers, father of 4 children, was trying to cross Bayshore and was unfortunately hit by a motorcycle and passed away. There's been talk about closing down Bayshore from traffic. What are your thoughts on what we can do to make Bayshore more safe?
When Mr. Gage passed away, unfortunately back in January, I called for a public meeting, public workshop on Bayshore, and my colleagues agreed with me 100%. And we held that meeting a couple weeks ago. The idea was that city staff would come in, present for a few minutes about what they've been doing, and then we'd listen to the public. And we got 4 hours of public input. And since then, we've gotten lots of emails and phone calls. If you have additional thoughts or input on Bayshore, send me an email, bill.carlson@tampagov.net. Happy to forward it on to the mobility department. Unfortunately, one motion from that day got all the publicity, and that was the one about my colleague made a motion about possibly closing Bayshore one day a month so that it could turn into a park. But that's a short-term concept. The bigger issue is, what do we do about Bayshore? And so I made the second motion, which again, my colleagues unanimously supported, which was to ask the staff to really listen to the input of the public from those 4 hours and all the input since, and take that and use it and compare it to, engineering studies and traffic studies to really figure out what a comprehensive solution for Bayshore might be. I've got some constituents who are mad that that the city reduced the speed limit on Bayshore. They want it to be faster because they think that it's caused people to go down McDill, which has caused traffic through neighborhoods, and they feel like it's causing traffic on Bayshore, and they feel like it's unsafe for that reason. And I've got constituents who want to shut down Bayshore completely every day of the week and everything in between. And so we need to hear all those opinions and try to figure out what's the best course of action for our community. And instead of looking at a piece at a time, like it's been done before, what I wanted to do is look at it comprehensively so we could make a decision that hopefully would last 5 or 10 years. And in the meantime, hopefully save important lives like the ones we've lost.
So we have these restaurants open, salons are open. Does Bill Carlson feel comfortable taking his kids to go get a haircut or to go out for dinner at this time?
My kids are deciding on their own they don't want haircuts. I think they like long hair. I think with the right conditions, maybe a hairstylist would be okay. Restaurants, I don't know yet. I'm still ordering remotely. It's a lot more expensive, but I think it's important to support our local restaurants. Local restaurants are literally the flavor of our community, and they help define our culture, and we can't afford to let them go out of business because we would lose so much from our culture, not to mention all the jobs and economic impact that they have. So I'm going to continue mostly staying at home, but I'll be ordering online, trying to support our local restaurants and shops.
Bill, one of the public services that you provided is started several years ago, a weekly kind of neighborhood meeting on Friday mornings at 8 a.m. Can you tell everyone about the group that you started and how it's grown and what the purpose is?
Yeah, about 15 years ago, there was a committee called the Historic Hyde Park Neighborhood Association Land Use Committee, and they had a weekly breakfast on Friday mornings. And after about 5 or 6 years, they invited me to come sit in. It was 8 to 10 people every Friday, and we just sit around having cafe con leche, talking about neighborhood issues in Hyde Park. So I got to get a drink from my Spider-Man cup. And we started drawing so many people from around the city and other neighborhood leaders who wanted help also that we changed the name to Cafe con Tampa. And since then, we've grown a lot. We've moved into Oxford Exchange. We meet every Friday morning and get anywhere from 80 to 150 people to talk about important issues. Unfortunately, we're not able to meet in person now, so we've been meeting online. Anybody who's interested can go to facebook.com/Cafe con Tampa or to cafecontampa.com. We also have a YouTube channel you can search for. And we've done about 25 interviews similar to this with lots of different speakers, including the person from the Federal Reserve Bank that I talked about earlier.
When you're doing these interviews, are you setting it up in a way that people can participate and ask questions?
Yeah. In fact, you've got a couple of questions on here. I don't know if you see them, but somebody just said ambulances need to go down Bayshore Boulevard to save lives, and you can't close Bayshore because Tampa General Hospital saves too many people. Yeah. And one of the speakers that we had at our public meeting was fire rescue. And one of the top biggest questions we get about Bayshore is why can't you put speed bumps? And the folks told us that in the public meeting that if you take ambulances and run them across speed bumps, it could waste a minute or more, and that could mean life or death for the person they're carrying. Plus, while the paramedics are working on somebody, they can't be jolted by going over speed bumps. And I had never heard that answer before. I think it was informative to a lot of people. Plus, we need roads that are not congested. So there are lots of issues related to Bayshore that we need to think about. Another question or comment you got was someone said many single parents need to go back to work, but there's no daycare or school. And city council doesn't supervise school district, so you should get a school board member on and interview them about this.
Well, I did interview a school board member last week. The interesting thing, we have city council, we have school board, we have county commission, but of course the state government is the most powerful and is making most of the rules. And I think it's important for citizens to understand their government, and sometimes it's challenging because of all the different governmental organizations that we have.
One of the things I've been doing in this crisis, a lot of people think that city council is making all decisions. We're starting to make some of our regular decisions, but we're not involved in these executive orders at all. Most of them are being made by this emergency policy group, which is that county-wide group of which the mayor has one seat. But the bigger decisions are being made by the governor right now.
And of course, the governor in this made the decision to shut down schools across the state of Florida. The local school boards have to follow the governor's order. It is interesting, and that's why I appreciate the opportunity to do some of these interviews of our elected officials, because I think it's so important that everyone understands, what does the city council do? What does the county commission do? What does the school board do? And gets to know who our elected officials are, because we have elections coming up. And
the good thing now is that there is and without talking about the past, there's a collaborative relationship, I think, among everybody now, a collegial relationship, where that hasn't always been so. The city has no real influence over the schools, but we do control the safe pathways to and from schools. So, for example, Emily Hinsdale, who may be watching at some point, runs sidewalk stompers, and they're advocating for safe paths to and from schools. And I campaigned a year and a half ago in part on that we needed to really improve that, because it affects how kids start their days and end their days in class and whether they get there safely. And the mayor is on the same page about it. School district's on the same page. And so we're all collaborating. Unfortunately, money may end up being an obstacle here in the next year or two. But philosophically, I think we're pretty much all on the same page.
Well, Bill, there's been I don't know if there's any other questions that you're seeing on Facebook Live that you want to answer. I know we're kind of getting towards the end of our.
One thing I just want to mention real fast, if you don't mind, anybody who's interested in the economy, there are two big issues going on right now. One is public safety related to the disease, but the other is the economy. And I'm very interested in the economy, been very involved in economic development since I lived in Singapore. And we need to move our economy in a new direction. And we needed that before this virus hit. We're facing 20+% unemployment. We're facing a time where we really need to make some big moves. But there are some short-term moves that are happening that the state, federal government are making, some that we're doing at a local level. But longer term, we really need to reconfigure our economy. There's a website I created called tampascorecard.com, tampascorecard.com. Please go to it. There's a presentation and you can email me with any questions. But the short form of what it says is that despite what we were told for many years, Tampa hasn't done that well economically. And we especially have not done that well compared to our peer set. We haven't done as well as St. Pete, and we are way, way, way behind our benchmark cities like Atlanta, Austin, Charlotte. And what we need to do is catch up. For most of the last 9 years, the middle class in Tampa shrunk, the people in poverty increased, and our home ownership rate is the second lowest in the state. And those are unacceptable numbers. And what Moaz Lemiam from the College of Business at USF says is that the Amazons of the world, the big companies of the world, and the well-educated people, they'll look at the numbers that the best cities in the world use to measure themselves. And so the Tampa scorecard has those measures that other cities use. It's not a PR message. It's easy for us to cherry pick the things that make us look good and talk about those. But I think what real leaders do is we focus on the real measurements, the real issues, and we try to get those real issues addressed. And so I could talk about this forever, but the last point on it is that last Thursday, I proposed and my colleagues unanimously agreed that we should set up a committee, an economic advisory committee of the city that would also have representatives from the EDC, the port, the airport, and the chamber to give input to the city council and the mayor on ending the economic disparities based on race and gender and helping move us out of poverty, not because of our social beliefs, but because it's important for us if we want to be ranked among the best cities in the world, because those are the numbers that are holding us back.
So, Bill, as someone like myself who's lived in Tampa since I was 2 years old, going back to the 1960s, I remember when Tampa got their first Super Bowl and there was a slogan, Tampa being America's next great city, etc. I guess last question, kind of going back with your previous answer, what are your top 3 priorities or wishes to help us be that great city that we all want to be?
Yeah, I think when I was running for office, I talked about higher expectations. In the 90s, we wanted to be the call center capital of the world. And living in Asia, I could see that a lot of it was going to move overseas. Now it's being converted by software robots. And we've never really set our expectations high enough. And I think for years we compared ourselves to Charlotte, Austin, and Atlanta, and we haven't come close to them. So yeah, that's an interim step. But we really need to look at the best cities in the world and figure out how we can be the same or better. Singapore, when it was founded in 1965, said they wanted to have the Swiss standard of living by, I think it was 1990, and they surpassed that. And now they have the highest per capita income in the world. Some quick solutions. Number one, I think we need to diversify our economy. That means we can't be reliant on just real estate. There's been too much focus on real estate. What I say to real estate people is we need to focus on who's going to rent their space or buy their space, not just building more buildings. And they agree, because we need to focus on where their customers are coming from. We need to focus on innovation and entrepreneurship. That is building up more local companies. For years, economic development is still, economic development people subsidize companies from places like New York, where people want to pay less taxes and have cheaper labor. And that doesn't help us culturally. It doesn't help us with our economy. Contrast that with a company a few months ago or a year ago that sold for about $1.5 billion and made 70 local millionaires, including some who were former students at USF. And we we need to focus on building our local companies, helping them grow national, grow global, and then helping the entrepreneurs exit and then help them reinvest in the next generation. We also need to build up the arts, not just because it's great to have culturally, but because the best and brightest people in the world are also artists. They're creative, and we want them to be fully engaged in our arts community. And we want to be an international city. We need to be engaged in the world. We need to compare ourselves to the best cities in the world. We need to get investment from around the world, and we need to make sure that we have the best in the world in everything. Finally, we need to make sure we pay attention to and respect our local neighborhoods. We spend too much time in the city and downtown for years, and the city. I was not on city council yet, but the city ignored the neighborhoods. The neighborhoods now are coming back because the new mayor and the new city council are focused, and we need to make sure that we pay attention to the quality of life or where our current residents live, and then make sure we plan for residents who are coming in.
Well, Bill Carlson, thank you for taking the time to interview with me today. You know, it's in these unusual times, you know, as a candidate for office and you as an elected official, you know, we're not able to be out there and shake hands and go to a Chamber of Commerce meeting, et cetera. So it's been a really great opportunity to be able to try and do a public service by having these conversations with elected officials. I interviewed a pediatrician and a school psychologist to help parents give them tips to help their kids get through this. And so I think it's really helpful when everyone can hear from their community leaders. And I understand on one of your upcoming interviews, you're going to have a really special guest.
Yeah, last year because I lived in Asia, I have a lot of friends in Asia, and last summer I took my middle son to Asia, and when we stopped in Hong Kong, it turns out Gary was there meeting with his daughter, and his daughter, people may not know, is first of all brilliant, but for several years she was a model, and now she's working in the fashion industry worldwide, and she's helping to operate the retail branches of a international fashion company in several countries. She was starting the Hong Kong and China offices, and then she went to Australia, and I think she was just in London. I mean, she's brilliant, and she's from here. She grew up here, and you know, now is helping to run a fast-growing international fashion brand. I think it's an interesting story. And how old is she? 22 or something?
22. She's 22. And last week, I did an interview of her when she was on lockdown in London, which I think you saw, and then you called me and said, "I want to interview your daughter." Well, here's the interesting thing. I was, you know, telling her how I was missing her, but I was happy that she was safe in London. At the time that she was doing that interview with me, she had arranged for a plane ticket home. And so last week, literally after the interview went on Facebook, it's in the middle of the night and I hear the dogs barking, and I'm half awake. I get up, and my son, her twin brother, I see him downstairs, and the lights are off, and I see the shape of another person. I said to my son, Corey, do you have a friend with you? And he said, yeah, I brought home this girl that I like. I go, Corey, what about social distancing? You know, we can't have strangers in the house. And so the girl walks up the stairs. It's dark. All I see is like long hair. I can't make out a face or anything. I'm going, God, someone's walking up the stairs, and I'm in my pajamas. And she says hello. And it took me like 5 seconds to process it. It was my daughter who surprised me coming home from London. So she's been home, but she's down in Miami getting ready because of the open up order by the governor. She's in charge of opening up their store, Brandy Melville USA in Miami. So we're very proud of her. I'll look forward to watching you interview her.
Yeah, and obviously I'm on this show because I want Gary to become a judge. We need smart people who are thoughtful, you know, who take the time to understand issues and understand the interconnectivity of issues. And as a judge candidate, I think he's not allowed to talk about his perspective on anything, but I could talk about mine. But we need good people who are well-grounded and thoughtful and who have good values. And I think that I've known Gary for a long time. And if you don't vote for Gary just because he's a good guy, look at how brilliant his kids are and vote for him because of that, please.
Well, I appreciate that. We have a countywide election on August 18th, and I'm doing everything I can to earn the trust of the voters. And I am very honored, Bill, to have your endorsement as well as numerous other elected officials in the community. And once again, Tampa City Councilman Bill Carlson, District 4, thank you for taking time out of your day to speak to our mutual Facebook friends and other members of the public today.
Great. Thank you so much, Gary.
Okay, so long, Bill.
Take care.